The Islamic Revolution Guard Corps is set to launch a fresh round of military drills in an effort to boost the capabilities of its forces.
We're going to have the military drills codenamed the Great Prophet 11 in central and southeastern Iran. The exercises are slated to be conducted from February 20th to 22nd.
Pakpur said rockets and long-range artillery will be tested on the first day of the drills. According to the Iranian commander, the troops will hone their civil defense skills on the second day. The third day will engage in infantry units as well as special commandos. Elsewhere, in his remarks, Brigadier General Pakpur said Tehran has been sending military advisors to certain countries at those countries' request. He then warned U.S. officials over threatening to take military action against Iran. Pakpur said the White House is unlikely to wage in such a war as it would be irrational to do so.
U.S. senators have put forward a measure to impose fresh sanctions on Iran's aviation sector. Republican lawmaker Marco Rubio has introduced the bill which accuses Iran of using commercial aircraft to support terrorism. The bill would require the Treasury Department to impose new sanctions against designated Iranian commercial airlines. The U.S. administration would also have to report the possible use of commercial aircraft to support Iranian armed forces and the Syrian government, among others. The U.S. sanctions on Iran's aviation sector were removed under the nuclear deal signed between Iran and the P5+1 in 2015. Since then, the UN Security Council and the International Atomic Energy Agency have on several occasions confirmed that Iran has complied with the provisions of the deal. To get more insight into the story, we go live to Irvine, California, in the U.S. to talk to Pi Ian, independent researcher and analyst. Mr. Ian, thank you so much for being with us. What do you think is the real aim behind this anti-Iran act?
Well, the real aim is not involving anything involving, quote, terrorism or threats from Iran in a nuclear capacity, which is why the JCPOA deal was set in the first place. They just need an excuse to be able to harass Iran. If it wasn't airlines that the Treasury is expected to sanction, then it could have been, you know, Iranian carpets being exported, pistachios could have been blamed for something potentially terrorist-oriented. These people are desperate. The Anglo-American establishment and Israeli establishments are desperate because the stakes are so massive. This latest thing with Rubio here in the U.S. involving this a proposal to sanction airlines clearly resulted from Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's recent visit to essentially give orders to Donald Trump, who clearly is not in charge of anything besides distracting the public with reality show style drama, blaming the press for this and that, and applying his signature to whatever the deep state individuals actually run things put on his desk. As I said, the establishment itself want and need Assad removed as soon as possible in Syria for a whole myriad of geostrategic reasons and goals that had been set years in advance. They also wouldn't mind if Iran tore up the JCPOA agreement out of being offended and frustrated with all of these fronts and insults. Then this establishment could go to the United Nations to get some bureaucratic authorization for potential conflict with Iran, assuming at that point that Russia and China would have to sign off on it because it's involving the UN, giving the mandate rather than just Washington. So they're really trying to get Iran frustrated enough to just throw in the towel on the JCPOA on its own. Iran, shrewdly enough, is smart to this and is not doing anything that rashly. Iran, Russia, and China are pulling an independent Turkey eastward toward the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Asian Infrastructure Bank, the New Development Bank, and other institutions to assist Ankara as it is now in the process of being attacked currency-wise and monetarily for disobeying the Western establishment. Another 2008 financial crisis is imminent across transatlantic nations, Europe and North America. Russia, China, Iran, Turkey, and others are circumventing U.S. dollar hegemony and petrodollar recycling for the sake of preserving autonomy and sovereignty, let alone for preparing for this imminent collapse across the banking sector globally. And other Putin himself out of Russia made the recent OPEC deal happen by mediating between Tehran and Riyadh. These facts are not sitting well between London, Washington, Tel Aviv, and these power centers, and hence they need some excuse. In this case, it's airlines. Tomorrow it could be anything else to try and pin the label of quote-unquote terrorism on a nation, Iran, that has, again, in exemplary fashion fought off Daesh, ISIS across Iraq as well as Syria, and done much more of an effort in doing so alongside its Russian and Syrian allies than the West has certainly done.
Exactly, Mr. Ian. And according to what you say also, it seems that they're just looking for an excuse now that Iran is holding its end of the bargain as far as the JCPOA is concerned. They're now accusing it of terrorism in order to, it seems, curb Iran's effective and positive role in Middle East crises, such as in Syria in particular, as we're talking about right now.
Yes, terrorism could not be a bigger farcical use of a term, because not only has Iran fastidiously held to each and every period dotted I, crossed T of the JCPOA agreement since it went into action, but it has, again, as I said, fought actual terrorism, actual insurgents, Takfiris, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, what have you, and not just over the Syrian campaign over the past year or so, but really, the past 16 years or so, Iran has held to fighting actual terrorists. But in this case, the term terrorist is code for non-compliance. It's the Western establishment's phrase for non-compliance, and Iran is a powerful, autonomous, independent, sovereign nation that is clearly very tightly allied with rising Eastern nations, namely Russia and China. And thus the effort to try and separate these nations, which again are powerful on their own, let alone combining their geostrategic, economic, and political efforts in deflecting Western hegemony, is causing a lot of confusion, a lot of infighting, and a lot of desperate usages of everything from rhetoric, like the word terrorism, which does not apply whatsoever with regard to Iran in this case.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ian, for your time and your thoughts. That was Apai Ian, independent researcher and analyst, talking to us live out of Irvine.
Well, the head of the Iranian delegation in the latest round of the Syria peace talks says negotiations have had significant progress.
For the second time after several years, delegations from some of the Syrian armed groups sat down with the government representatives. The atmosphere of the talks was a little more peaceful and calm compared to the Astana 1 talks. Settling the crisis in Syria is a time-consuming process, but hopefully we can make it. Iran has always believed in a political and a Syrian solution to the crisis. We hope a common understanding among all players, and especially the three main countries of Iran, Turkey and Russia, will contribute to positive changes in Syria. The Iranian negotiating team made its utmost efforts to push the negotiations forward.
Well, the two-day negotiations in the Kazakh capital ended on Friday with three countries which have brokered the negotiations agreeing to reinforce the Arab countries' ceasefire. Iran, Russia and Turkey are already looking to set a date for Astana 3 meetings. A new round of UN-led talks on Syria will also take place in Geneva on February the 23rd.
The U.S. Air Brigade helicopters arriving in Germany, preparing for their deployment further to the east. Transport and combat aircraft are just part of much stronger U.S. military deployment into Europe. Their land troops are already there or on their way to the Eastern European allied countries. This train carries U.S. Army Tank Battalion through Romania, to its final destination, a Black Sea port of Constanza, just a hand throw away from Russia. The US and NATO are saying that there is a real Russian threat to the Eastern European countries like Baltic states, Bulgaria, Romania and Poland. That's why US troops are sent to support Eastern European partners. That move is being widely welcomed here in Romania.
We have the popular support, public space support, media, political support, and we don't have any party who would argue or have a question mark or discussing in any way that choice.
This deployment doesn't lack public support in the Baltic states, Poland and here in Romania. The US troops that are arriving there are combat ready. Here they are just weeks ago, training in Poland, setting their gun sights and preparing for the move to the east.
All of these platforms roll off the train ready to fight. We will roll off the train combat ready, so we can fight from day one rolling off the train.
Something that Russia is nervous about. But how real is boogeyman of alleged Russian threat?
I believe that the Russian threat is real, but it is not as dramatic as it appears in line with the propaganda agencies. There is indeed a threat from Russia for the Baltic countries and those that have a missile shield or NATO troops.
And after the last week's flyby incident in the Black Sea and big NATO fleet maneuvers there, one thing is for sure, Russia-NATO tensions are on the rise. Alyosha Milenko.
Ukraine's facing rolling blackouts as the country's energy sector was switched to emergency mode on Friday. People were asked to save up electricity during morning and evening hours. Meanwhile, the country's biggest metal manufacturing plants are on the brink of an immediate shutdown due to the lack of coal.
The emergency state will allow for using the capacity of energy-generating companies more effectively. These measures, however, can affect the markets and may cause losses to the enterprises.
The emergency order was enforced amid a blockade of shipments of anthracite coal, which is extracted in the areas of eastern Ukraine controlled by pro-Russia forces. The key railway links are blocked by war veterans who demand Kyiv stop trading with pro-Russia forces amid the ongoing clashes. But the Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko said the trade glues the country together and gives jobs to thousands of people on both sides of the conflict line.
They don't block down control areas of Donetsk and Luhansk regions. They don't cause them any problems. They put the blockade on Ukraine instead. They block our fight to restore the country's territorial integrity.
The blockade has been blamed on the lack of progress in implementing the Minsk ceasefire deal to end the conflict in eastern Ukraine.
One cannot say that there is an enemy on the other side and at the same time trade with them. Sooner or later people get tired of these contradictions. They call the situation a business on blood, so the blockade was meant to happen someday.
Eastern Ukraine is hit by a nearly 3-year-long conflict between the government and pro-Russia forces. The fighting has taken the lives of around 10,000 people. Kyiv estimates that the blockade can cost Ukraine's economy up to $2 billion and may undermine its fragile recovery. Many Ukrainians hear the